How's it going, guys? My name is Jimmy Champagne, and today we're going to break down the special features on the Halloween 2018 Blu-ray. I also have a little bit of a rant on the overall package at the end, so make sure you stick around for that. Before we jump into it though, I'm skipping a couple of these special features because I've already done dedicated videos on them, and I put those in an iCard, and I'll also link them at the end of the video. And when you're done with this video, you need to go over to Slash and Cast channel and check out their horror award show for 2018. They put together an entire awards feature-length ceremony that's absolutely incredible. It features YouTubers like me and We Watched a Movie and some other ones that you might not know about. So at the very least, you'll get to see a cool award show and maybe find some new YouTubers to watch. I'll link that down in the description. The first scene on the disc is one that extends Laurie's target practice at the beginning of the movie, and it sort of alters the timeline just a little bit because it leads directly into Aaron and Dana showing up at Laurie's house to interview her. There's also a few more shots of Laurie cleaning her guns, but at the end of the scene, it gets pretty dark where Laurie loads a bullet into her .45 and holds it up under her chin, contemplating suicide. Now, this is a scene that I actually think could have made it into the final cut. I like the breakneck pace of the movie, but this happens at the very beginning, so it really wouldn't have altered that too much, and they really put stock into us believing that Laurie is this traumatized character 40 years after the events of the original Halloween, and having her hold that gun up to her chin really spells it all out. The reason I like this scene so much is because assuming it happens every morning, Laurie is literally challenging herself to push forward. She's putting herself right in death's way and then challenging herself to move around it, and I think that's really powerful. Allison's morning jog is a moment from the novel that I really liked, and it's cool to see it come to life on screen pretty much exactly how I imagined it. I also think this scene is really funny because if you've seen my One Good Scare videos, it's kind of a running joke that Michael kills a dog in nearly every single Halloween movie, so having it in this one would have been kind of funny. But that being said, I think if they included it, they would have had to cut the shot at the end of it where Michael is just standing there in all white, because not only is that kind of betraying the whole mood they set for this movie where Michael isn't hunting anyone in particular, he's just going out to kill. With all those people crowded around that hanging dog, they would see Michael standing there in all white. It's just a little too hokey to be included in the final movie, but if you put that jog scene in it, I think it would work out okay. The scene where Allison is standing outside of her school talking to Dave and Vicky is one that I can see why it was cut from the final movie. I think it's cool that it fleshes out Dave, Oscar, and Vicky before they're ultimately killed, but it doesn't really give us enough character to really make their deaths any more impactful. I do like that it expands the town of Haddonfield, but the acting and the writing here just aren't very good. It's really hammy and it's just doing a lot of telling instead of showing, so for everyone's sake, I think it was good they cut this scene. That banh mi sandwich scene in the movie is one of the dumbest moments in the entire Halloween franchise, I'll be the first to admit it, but it's nice to know that it was cut down heavily from what it could have been. After watching that first scene featuring Laurie at the beginning of the movie, that banh mi sandwich scene even seems more egregious now that it was included in the final cut, but it's nice to know that it could have been a lot longer and they cut it down heavily. These police officers are acting like they just met each other even though they're partners and presumably spend their entire days together. It feels like this was a warm-up for an actual scene, like Michael carving one of their heads into a jack-o'-lantern, which is something I think we all would have liked to see in the final movie. They really saved the worst for last with this final deleted scene though. It involves Hawkins and Sartain driving around Haddonfield looking for Michael, and they have a really awkward conversation that turns into Sartain asking Hawkins if he wears ladies' underwear. He obviously doesn't get a response, so he starts digging for gold right in front of Hawkins. It's absolutely disgusting. It's totally bizarre. I don't even know why they filmed this. Now, I'll admit that it's so bizarre it's hard not to laugh at this moment, but can you imagine if this made it into the final movie? People were already pissed that Sartain put on Michael's mask, and he's the head doctor over at Smith's Grove. He's been watching Michael for something like 20 years, and he took over for Dr. Loomis. If he was acting like this on the job, there's no way he'd keep that job for more than a week. It just doesn't make any sense. These deleted scenes are disappointing to say the least, but it's kind of par for the course on what Universal has been offering with this movie. I really wish we could have seen the alternate ending, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, but I'm just not surprised at how bad the overall offering is here. The first special feature is called Back in Haddonfield, and it's sort of a scattershot interview with everyone who had some involvement with getting this movie made. We get a nice snippet of our boy Ryan Turek, which is always cool, and there are a bunch of behind the scenes B-roll shots that we haven't seen yet, so it's nice to see David Gordon Green actually directing this movie in lieu of a director's commentary. I really like the line from Jason Blum where he says they walked the line of reinventing something new and bowing to the old, because that captures what Halloween 2018 is, and I think the biggest thing that it got right, and it also shows that he's not just the guy writing the checks. There's also a nice 3.2-second scene featuring Jeff Bradley, who's the third credited writer on this movie, who you probably have never heard of until you sat down to watch it in theaters, because none of the marketing featured him, so it's nice to see that the Blu-ray has him on it, at least for a second. The original Scream Queen is on par with all the other bare minimum offerings we got here. It's like they took that high school deleted scene that's all exposition and just broke it down into a featurette. They asked everyone involved with this movie what they think of Laurie Strode and how they're bringing her back, and it's like they cut them off after the first second before they said anything noteworthy. So overall, just skip this one. It's not worth watching. The Sound of Halloween is one that's actually worth watching. It's all about how John Carpenter came up with the original Halloween and how they kind of evolved into making this score. The best moment in the entire thing is that John Carpenter mentions his dad taught him about 5/4 time, and that's how he created the Halloween theme. And then right before that, David Gordon Green says that the Halloween theme is John Carpenter's ringtone. So it's nice that this is something he came up with thanks to his dad and still cares about 40 years later. There's a lot of jokes out there about how John Carpenter will do anything for a check, and to be fair, he perpetuates those jokes, but they're always in written interviews, and when you're reading them, it's hard to see those as jokes and not read them literally. So getting to see Cody Carpenter and Daniel Davies talk about how much they admire John Carpenter and how much they love working with him and how much he appreciates the original Halloween soundtrack is great. It's something we don't often get from interviews with him. There's a really good moment right at the end where they're all working on The Shape Hunts Allison together, which is the best track in the entire movie bar none, and they're having a ton of fun doing it, which is great because that's what the movie is all about. It makes Halloween look like more of a passion project and less of a product, so it's cool to see that some people involved actually see it that way. Thankfully, Universal was smart enough to film a whole featurette about making the mask because Christopher Nelson absolutely nailed it. I would really watch a full featured documentary about how this mask was created, or how really any horror masks are created. I think that whole process is just absolutely incredible. We also get to hear James Jude Courtney speak about the character in this featurette, which is great because he's the Michael Myers in this movie. I know that Nick Castle is getting credit for playing Michael, but he was really only in 2 shots, and a lot of the scariest scenes in Halloween 2018 all are thanks to James Jude Courtney. So finally, he's getting his recognition immortalized on the Halloween Blu-ray, even if the special feature is a little lackluster. The last special feature we get is Jamie Lee Curtis, David Gordon Green, John Carpenter, and Jason Blum all sitting around a table shooting the shit about making this movie. This one's important because it's as close as we'll ever get to having a director's commentary. David Gordon Green actually talks about how he turned Jason Blum down for other horror movies until Halloween came across his desk, and from that moment it became a passion project. This special feature also gets points for being the only one to acknowledge Deborah Hill's existence and how big of a part she played in making Halloween a reality in the first place. That's all the special features. They're incredibly disappointing, and I don't think Universal could have dropped the ball any harder. It feels like they forgot that home video releases are supposed to include special features, and they just threw these together based on stuff they had recorded from press interviews and just behind the scenes shots they got while the movie was filming. It's so fucking frustrating that everyone involved with actually making this movie seems to understand how big of a deal it is, and they care about it a great deal, except for the people who actually are putting it out in theaters. It really reminds me of Paramount and how they treated the Friday the 13th franchise, in the sense that they were embarrassed about it and they only made those movies because it was cheap and they had big box office returns. They didn't care about that franchise one way or the other, no matter how many people turned out to see it. If you look at when this movie started production all the way up until now, the way Universal has treated this movie has been absolutely embarrassing. Not only is the poster bare minimum, but they called it Halloween to make us think it was a reboot instead of a sequel like it actually is. And finally, they showed off most of the movie, if not the entire plot, in all of the trailers they released before it came out. Hopefully in 5 or 10 years we get a collector's edition of this movie from Scream Factory that gives us what we actually want. We turned out and gave Universal $250 million for this movie, and they turned around and gave us this piss poor example of a home video release. It's really just unacceptable. If you want to know why I keep harping on the lack of a director's commentary, I would urge you to go watch one, because you'll see that they're an invaluable source to hear directly from a filmmaker why they made a movie the way they did. As for whether or not you should buy the home video release, I would say you should, because if you go to Best Buy right now, you can get the 4K version for $25, and that comes with a regular Blu-ray and a digital version, so that's a pretty good deal. Anyway guys, I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments below. My name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.